So I'm going to talk about Raphaël. So who doesn't know what is Raphaël? Who had no idea what I'm going to talk about? You gotta kidding me. Okay, then we'll skip the next slide, I guess. Next couple of slides. So it started as 3 years ago, and it's JavaScript vector library to drawing stuff on the web. Uses SVG and VML, doesn't use Canvas, and more concentrated on creating nice APIs and solving any other issues. So chapter 2.0. I basically giving this talk because I was told recently that Raphaël is stagnating, no development happening, and I was such upset about this because there's huge development happening for last year. It's just happening on the 2.0 branch, and it's all started like a small improvement, as most of the time it happens, and then it grows, and I can't stop to improving it. So I'm going to release it because I can't really hold it anymore. So what's new in 2.0? First of all, the VML, the Microsoft drawing rubbish, it was completely rewritten from scratch. So I just take everything that was in Raphaël and throw it away. The problem was that as many developers, when I was creating Raphaël, I look at the MSDN, and look at the other libraries like Dojo, like XCanvas, how they use a VML and obviously follow the same path. That was a big mistake. They're all wrong. They all did it wrong. So I did it better now. So that's like an example of a difference in VML which I was trying to solve. It's called Subpixel Rendering. If you see there are two squares, and the square on the right, the square on the left is the square drawn in SVG. The square on the right is how the same square will look on VML. You probably can't see the difference from this, so let's zoom it up. So that happens because when you specify the coordinates as integers, and when you use SVG and you use 1 pixel stroke, it actually doesn't fit in the pixel grid and happens to be on the edge of 2 pixels, and it gets blurred across these 2 pixels. And we could have a long discussion, is it a good or bad thing, but this is how it is. And in VML, you use CSS to position elements, and you obviously use integer numbers for that, and that's why it's always nice and crisp, but it's not the same. It's not consistent, and sometimes this difference is really, really annoying. So it's fixed now. In Raphaël 2.0, it's pixel to pixel exactly the same in VML and SVG, because it was rewritten again. The transformations, it's another important part of pretty much any drawing process. So the transformations, which originally I didn't pay much attention when I created the Raphaël, and then I paid more attention to it, and then I decided to completely change it, the whole API of the transformations. The reason why I did it is because it's something which you use most of the time if you're really doing stuff, and something which is very important. So what are the transformations? Basically, it's like I can rotate and draw rectangles, and I could rotate it around some point. And then I should be able to rotate it around other point. That was impossible in Raphaël before. If you want to rotate around another point, you will reset the previous transformation. So now you could rotate around another point. The problem with the transformation, then when you apply multiple transformations, they're all relative to previous one. So if now I want to say, okay, now translate horizontally 100 pixels, you will see this picture, because the whole coordinate system is transformed as well, which is maybe correct, but not really useful. So I decided to introduce relative and absolute transformations in Raphaël. So now you could say transform relatively, and then you will see this, or you could say transform absolutely, and then you could see that. I think it's important in transformation to specify the origin of transformation, especially when you're talking about rotation and scale. For example, in SVG, when you rotate, you specify the point around which you rotate. When you scale, you don't specify the points around which you scale, because it doesn't really sound like make sense. So I'll show you. If you want to scale this rect from around 0, 0 point, it will look like this. That's how it by default does it. Not really useful. Most of the time you want to scale somewhere around the middle of this square, or maybe here, maybe there. So you should specify the point of scale. It actually exists in Raphaël 1.5, but I just want to emphasize it a little bit. So original thought of API will be like that, right? So you rotate about some point, then you rotate around another point, then you translate around another point, and that sounds good. No, it doesn't sound good at all. The problem with that approach is that later on you can't really. Okay, you rotate, you scale, you rotate, you translate. Now you want to get the transformation of the element. How are you going to do this? How are you going to animate the transformation of element? So this approach of this API doesn't really work well. The SVG provides a different approach. It has a transform attribute which contains a string, which contains the comments. I like the idea of one attribute which keeps all the data, but the format of this is not really good. I look at the Canvas API. I don't want to talk about Canvas API. So SVG is a little bit better, but it's still not good enough. So I was thinking about this, and I decided that the problem sounds familiar. There is already in SVG the API for linked comments with the parameters. It's called SVG Path. When you create SVG Path, you have a comment, and you have parameters. You move to this point, you draw a line to this point, you draw a cubic bezier to this point, you draw something else. And I decided that it would be in spirit of SVG to follow the same pattern for transformation, and that's this API appears. So you give a string. In string, each letter represents a comment, and numbers represent the values you pass to the comment. So for example, the first line, you could read like, rotate 30 degrees around 100, 120, then rotate minus 45 degrees around 60 to 110. Then you could, when you ask for transformation, give you a string. So you could ask this element, what is your transformation? Grab this transformation, apply it to another element. And when you get it as an array of comments. So you could easily parse it, go through the comments, remove some comments, add new ones. You could also, when you specify, you could also use ellipses. And in this case, ellipses will be replaced with the current transformation of an element. So in this case, I say like scale twice, and then apply whatever current transformation is. And on the last third line, I say, OK, whatever it is, now transformation, then scale twice around 100 position and do it absolutely. So the lowercase letter means relative transformation. Uppercase means scale. You could rotate, you could translate, you could scale, and first time in Raphaël, you could do matrix transformation. So just like pretty much any transformation. Animation. The animation in Raphaël is actually pretty good, and the API is pretty nice, and nobody was complaining except me. So I look at other APIs of animation, and I don't like any of them because they don't give you flexibility, and so let's just look at what I did. So this is a small example of animation. This is a sort of Pac-Man-like animation. So I click on this circle, and it moves on. That's pretty simple. Right, so let's see this code, how it's actually done. Not here. Here. Right. So we include the Raphaël, and then we create we create the Raphaël, call the Raphaël function. We create the surface. And then the Raphaël function now have a fourth parameter, which is function callback. So it will create surfaces on DOM ready, and then it call the callback, and the surface will be callback in the context of the surface. The surface becomes this. Now, this CA is a new alias for custom attributes. So the custom attributes exist before. Just I want to again emphasize a little bit. So we create another new custom attribute mouth, and basically the mouth. It's a function which receives value from 0 to 1 and return me the path of a Pac-Man face. And from 0 is closed mouth and 1 is open mouth. And whatever between is whatever is between. As soon as I have this as a custom attribute, I could then animate this custom attribute. And I could animate the mouth. So then I create the animation. This is another new feature. So I call the Raphaël animation, and I create the animation with 2 keyframes, and on the half is mouth wide open, and on the end of the animation, mouth shut. And I say that it's running 500 milliseconds. This is just animation. It wasn't applied to any element yet, just the object animation. So then I create a path, and as you see, the path doesn't get any path string, so it's path without path string. And set attributes mouse 0, which will call the function, and it will draw me a Pac-Man with a shutted mouth. I make it yellow, remove the stroke, and on click, I say this animate, and I grab the animation I just created, and tell it to repeat 8 times. And then I say animate transformation 400 per x and 0 per y. So the element, it happened to be in 2 animations at the same time. So it's opening and shutting his mouth, and it's moving horizontally. And they applied to the same element. And the first animation actually repeated 8 times, and this last animation just goes straight. Right. Yeah, already look at the code. So the animation usually represents like you click the button, you start the animation, and while it's going, you have no idea what's going on, unless it's finished and you receive your callback, and then you say, aha, animation's finished. But if you want really to know the status of animation at any point of the time, you don't really have a tools to get it. So in Raphaël 2, I introduced a new feature, so you could actually get the status of animation, and you could change the status of animation. And that gives you the ability to totally control any animation as much as you want. So you could change, you could stop, you could continue from the point where it stops, and so on and so far. I think it's awesome. Yeah, it doesn't work like this. You lost your point. So the whole API still works. So you still could create animation like that. Say animate to the new attributes during this time, using callback. But behind the scene, it will create the animation object. But you could do it yourself. You could create animation object, and then you could animate element just like that, and pass the object. The good thing about it is that then later you could say, what's your status? And the element could tell you, OK, I am in 3 animations right now. The first animation I am in the beginning, the second animation I'm in the middle, and the last animations I'm about to finish. And this is the animation. So like, OK, I'll grab the second animation and apply it to this element, because I wanted him to move like that, and so on. So the API is like that. There is a method status. And by default, status returns you an array of all these animations and their statuses. If you pass the animation object, it returns you the number from 0 to 1, depending where the animation is. But it also setter, so if you pass the number and the animation, then it will change the status of this current animation. It jumps to the position you specify, forward or backward, depending on the current status. You could pause and resume. You could stop. Set time is basically a shortcut for status, but you use milliseconds from the beginning of the animation. For example, if you want to sync with video, you better operate milliseconds and percentage. And the animation has method delay and repeat. So delay, it means it started not right now, but after some given period of milliseconds. And repeat, basically, it will go to the end, then roll back to the beginning, and go again. And that's as many times as you specify. If you want infinite loop, you pass infinity. OK, events. I'm generally a big fan of event-driven development and event-driven architecture. So I was thinking that events is something that Raphaël is missing. So not so long ago, I wrote the library called EVJS, which is basically custom event managing thing. And somebody asked me yesterday, so why I don't use some existing libraries for events? Well, basically because when I wrote it, they didn't exist yet. So you could use jQuery for that. So I'm not promoting this library. I mean, you don't have to use it, but Raphaël have it inside. So how it works? It works. Raphaël always firing the events in the Eve space, so you could always listen to events, and lots of internal features are banded on events. But you can do it like that. So you could say, OK, Eve on an animation, do some function. That means on any animation, event, animation-related event in Raphaël, it will call this function. So if you start animation, stop animation on each animation frame. Or you could say on each animation start, call me function, some animation started. Or each animation start dot ID of element for this particular element, call the function. Or on each animation related event for this particular element, call this function. Oh, you get the point, I hope. So this is another thing I add. Let's say you want to draw the polyline. This is actually how you approach. So you draw a line like that. It's very easy to do it in SVG or in Raphaël for that sake. And the problem that it's not always what you want. Sometimes it's quite easy, but sometimes you want a curve, and the only thing you know is the points which curve is going through. And you don't really want to create this cubic Bezier and thinking how they should go. So basically, you need to draw the spline. So I add new commands in Raphaël, so now it's as easy as that. You could create the curve without much trouble. The only difference that instead of specifying the command L for line, you specify command R. And that will create this shiny curve. You just specify the points, and it will draw you the curve around these points. You can do it with the math, but I guess nobody likes math, so I don't like math. So I decided to put it in. Another improvement is bounding box. The bounding box is solid and bottom of SVG. Every time you do something, it's very commonly you want to know what the bounding box of element you are operating with. So like if you have this cloud, the bounding box would be this green rectangle. Now, for some reason in SVG, if you apply transformation bounding box doesn't take transformations into account. So let's say if you want to rotate the cloud and keep the bounding box, it will look like this. It doesn't really care about my cloud because it doesn't care about transformations. I don't think it's useful. I think it's stupid. So I changed it, and in Raphaël 2.0, you could use old way if you're crazy, or you like pain. But you could also do it the new way, and then it gives you a real bounding box of an element on each point. It wasn't easy, you know. This time was better. Okay. The view box is also a very powerful thing. It's basically, if you want to zoom page to some region, to show this region, because it's all vector graphics, it should be easily to achieve this. And that's what the view box in SVG is for. But unfortunately, VML has issues, which now are solved because I rewrote the VML. So view box is like that. You just scale, and you see the image like this. It doesn't scale, it changes the view box, but it's kind of scaling the whole thing down or up. And you can go back. So now this is view box, new view box commands in Raphaël. Right. Documentation. This is a painful thing for every developer, to write documentation. I'm not an exception. I hate to write documentation, especially take into account that, as you can hear, my English is not my first language, not even my second language. And I hate documentation. But good documentation is an essential part of any software. So this is a new documentation for Raphaël. It's very full. It has everything. And how it happened, actually, is I include the documentation into the Raphaël, into the source code. So I will be ensure that it's always in sync with the changes and bug fixes and so on and improvements. And so it generated this documentation. It had this search. So if you want to search for, let's say, get point at length, so it gives me that straight away. Or if I want to search like for point, give me print because it seems close. It's like trying to find the. It has nice search. Let's call it this. And it has all these methods here, so you could go through. They all alphabetize it. They all grouped, and the documentation itself has. It's very nice. It has all these, examples embedded in. It has all the parameters listed. You could have pass these parameters, so you pass just animation, all the types, all the explanation, all the source code, syntax highlighted, all very nice. I very like it. To do this documentation, I use a library I wrote. Because, as you could guess, I looked at existing libraries and didn't like them. And so that's how the comment looks in Raphaël at the moment. So you specify the name of the method as the first line. Then you specify the type, is it method or property? And you can see the first character in each line actually tells me what the line is for. So if it's asterisk, it's just a description, just a text. If it's hash, then it's an HTML. I take it as is. If it's greater than, then it's header. If the dash, it's list of arguments. And because in JavaScript you could pass different list of arguments to the same function, that gives you ability to create documentation for, if you pass 3 arguments, it's this. If you pass 4 arguments, it's that, and so forth and so far. And the pipe means it's a code, so it will be grabbed since it's highlighted and put into HTML. And the name of the element of the method will be taken off, will be alphabetized, it will all be structured. So it's structured, but it's very flexible. You could write any rubbish here, you could break it up, but I don't care about you because I wrote it for myself. Right, and for Raphaël. So the more important thing that Raphaël now has a good documentation. And I call this library Dr.js. So if you're interested, you could go and check out my GitHub account. So, what's new in Raphaël 2.0? I'm really running out of time because it's just 30 minutes talk. So I just quickly run through the new features. So Raphaël function now has the ability to specify the callback. So you could pass the callback in, and it will give you the callback. The new object animation, which I was talking about, has methods delay and repeat. The element has method data, just like jQuery data, so you could associate data with an element and then take it. The get bounding box was improved to actually rely on the transformation. The new method glow, which everybody was asking, it's just like drop shadow, but be careful because it's consumed lots of memory, so don't use it cautiously. On drag over, it's the way to assign the event handler in case when you're dragging, Raphaël has drag and drop built in, so when you drag over some other element, it could throw the event, so you're dragging it around on top of this circle, you drag over this rectangle, so you could use it for your work. The pause is the animation part, remove data is from opposite data, resume set time status, it's all for animations, the transform, new method to create to apply the transformations and to get it. The new alias for custom attributes CA. The paper has a for each method, so you could go through all elements on the page and do something. Get element by ID, kind of tells for itself. Get element by point, so you could pass X and Y and give you the point, give you the element which is on this point, the topmost, not all of them. Path has a new command for the splines. Render fix is a special method for Firefox because it has issue with SVG subpixel rendering when you resize the browser window. If you run into this issue, you could use this method to fix it up. Set start and set finish is 2 methods. So you could call set start, then run some code, then call set finish, and set finish will give you back the set which contains all the elements which will add it to paper between set start and set finish. So this presentation is all done in Raphaël, if you noticed, and each slide is using set start, set finish, and then when new slide appears, I just drop it down. I don't care what I add there. The animation, new property. The color is a new nice utility function. You could pass the color in all the formats you could possibly think about, and it gives you back the object which has a hex representation, RGB, HSL, HSB, and all this stuff. You create unique ID. It's basically internal. The full fill is like a small templating solution. HSB, HSL, RGB obviously give you the color, but you specify HSB or RGB. The metrics, if you really want to play with transformations, each element now has a metrics property, and metrics property represent the metrics, and you could then grab this metrics and add some new transformation. If you want to play with metrics, literally, go for it. There is API for that. Parse transform string gives you the ability to parse the string. Set has new methods clear, exclude, for each, and splice. There is a if, and there is even more awesomeness. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
So your platform is compatible, so I can run my Wii version 1 code in your library.
Sorry?
Yes. So this API is fully platform compatible.
Not fully.
Not fully. You documented those parts that are.
Well, basically, the only difference is the transformations. So all the other past new stuff, only transformation has been changed. And yeah, by the way, the Raphaël 2.0 available now. Yeah, I released it just before I start talking.
One more thing about the Glow method implementation. So you said there are some performance configurations.
The Glow, yeah, Glow creates shitloads of DOM elements to make the glow effect. So if you want to create a glow, it looks fine. If you want to animate then glow, then it doesn't work. I mean, it works, but you fucked. Yes?
My question's about, I've always thought that Raphaël, I really enjoy using Raphaël, and I always thought that it should, I'd like it to separate the renderer, VML or SVG, and make that optional to include either this or that. And I'm wondering if you thought of that, and even if you could imagine creating a canvas renderer with the same API.
God forbid. Not canvas. Well, I already split, if you look at the source code, I split Raphaël into 3 parts. So now there is Raphaël Core, Raphaël SVG, and Raphaël VML, which is built into one file still. And in my plans is to create a Raphaël Pro, which will be Raphaël without VML, but with all the different SVG features which are missing in Raphaël because of VML limitations at the moment. So if you're like developing for WebKit, let's say, and you don't care about IE, then you could just use Raphaël Pro, which gives you more power, but doesn't work in IE 6. But if you don't care about IE 6, 7, 8, then you're a lucky man. I'm jealous. But you can use it. It's a future. It's not there yet. There is Raphaël Pro already, but it doesn't include new features. It just doesn't have VML at the moment. So you could use it. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, then thank you one more time, and you can go and draw something amazing.